Here we go. Let's try this again. The wonderful wizardry of editing after the fact will, of course, allow me to kill that little fun bit of my microphone not being plugged in. Shh. Don't tell anybody. I have super high quality production stuff going on here. So, in any case, so we were talking about the all the fun build stuff going on. So, when we're doing water cooling, in most cases, in most builds, and most everything that people are going to be doing, water cooling is not necessary. Now, where water cooling is useful is whenever you have a CPU specifically that you're going to be overclocking. That is the only time you really need water cooling. Now, there are only certain CPUs that can even be overclocked. So yesterday when we did our out-of-box build, and you guys can go back and check that if you didn't see it, the out-of-box build we did yesterday on my old computer that had the stock Intel fan cooler that normally comes in the box with an Intel processor, and we did not need a damn thing more than that. That guy never got hot. The CPU never got more than, I want to say like 50 degrees Celsius, which is perfectly normal for a, it's perfectly normal for a processor to get that hot. I have in this new build an i7 77K. That K designation is actually what labels it as overclockable. With the new Ryzen chips that will be coming out soon, you're going to see X as a one that has extra overclocking features. I'm not really sure what that will do yet. We'll see. Nobody's seen any benchmarks on it yet anyway. So, that said, let me see. Hopefully I can get my damn music working again, because apparently it's been throwing a fit today and it doesn't want to show up actually on the stream. I was trying to have that playing for you guys, but I don't actually know if you can hear any of it at all, which is lovely. I know. I love that whenever things don't work right. It's okay, because my microphone apparently was unplugged the whole time. Because that's always fun. Anyway, so while while I'm getting that sorted back out here, let's go ahead and switch to our next scene here. And we're going to go ahead and get everything back uncovered. I'm going to real quick just try to restart VLC, and hopefully that will make it behave, and then it will be all good again. Yeah, this is that's always what do you call it? I don't know. Anyway, so here we go. I'm still seeing nothing coming out of the audio there. Oh, fantastic. It's great. It's almost like it's not even working. That is disappointing. Hate when stuff doesn't work, because then you guys are kind of missing out and you have to listen in silence, which is obnoxious. So yesterday, as we left it off, we put the cover on the PC case, and then we also put the dust cover on the CPU, just to keep it safe overnight while we left it sit. And I'm gonna be fussing over this damn audio all night. I have this distinct feeling, which is really annoying to me, but you know, it is what it is. So in any case, what I might real quick do on here is I might just try one thing to see if we can get the see if that will actually work here. No, doesn't look like it's doing anything of anybody any good at all. Yeah. Oh, good times. So at some point, hopefully I might be able to get my music working for you guys. We'll see later on. If we have a natural downtime, I will actually make an attempt to see if I can get the music back running here for you guys. Anyway, so we'll just leave that guy playing quietly on here, and this will sound really horrible, but you know what? It is what it is. So before we go too far along, someone actually asked me earlier if this guy here, the little TPM module that we have, if this guy goes in the computer now. And I will say, no, it does not. We're actually not going to be putting this in until near the end, when we actually start hooking up cables into the motherboard. And you guys will see that later. The reason why is because it's easier to plug the cables in than this guy. This guy has no cables that attach to him, so he's easy to maneuver around. We want to set up our cables first, then plug in this guy. So just so you guys know, I had not forgotten about it. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started on our fun little time on here. Oh, good grief. Get our static wristband on here. Now we're going to start moving on with the water cooler, like I said. Now this guy has two parts to him. Any water cooler, pretty much that you get nowadays, has two pieces to it. It has a back plate, and then it has the actual pump that you attach to the motherboard. The back plate, as the name implies, attaches to the back of the computer, and then the actual pump will attach right over the CPU. Now, if you remember what I was talking about yesterday, I did say that that this one already had thermal paste installed. If it does not have thermal paste installed, you will want to wait until after you install the back plate before you go and install the install any thermal paste. You want the computer sitting down like this when you install the thermal paste. So in here we actually have two back plates in the bag in here. One of these is if you have AMD CPUs, and the other one is if you have an Intel one. We're going to be using the Intel one. Now, with this Intel bracket, and I fortunately enough am familiar with this bracket, I know how it works. This bracket for the Intel side has two configurations. It slides these little screw holes out or in. And that is depending on if you have an 1150 or newer motherboard. And out, with the position out, is for if you have a the, what is it, 1386 motherboard, 1366 motherboard, something to that effect. So that's that one on there. Now I want to make sure that on there, just to be certain that I'm correct. I'm pretty certain that it's inside is the 1150 on here. We're going to consult another one of NCXT's horrible manuals that make no sense. And inside is the 1150. Okay, so I did fortunately enough get that one correct. Because that's awkward if you get that shit wrong, right? And you start installing shit how you shouldn't be. But yeah, so in any case, that's about the most we'll need for that. So we're going to switch to the side camera view here, which is actually incidentally the better camera view anyway. So that way, you guys can kind of see what's going on. Now, the back plate, as the name sounds, is going on the back of the motherboard. And we actually have a bunch of fun screws on here. We can get rid of the AMD back plate. We do not need that. We do have a bunch of screws that do a bunch of different things in here, and unfortunately AMD seems to have done a wondrous job of making none of these actual apparent. They're just haphazardly thrown in there. I'm pretty certain this bag is for the fans in the radiator, and then this one is for the actual pump itself. But we are going to double check and make sure of that, because I read this guy, and then after yesterday staring at that other manual, I've literally forgotten everything that is important in my life. So I'm not kidding. That manual really just burnt my brain whenever I was really tired. So it was it was painful. In any case, so that one's pretty simple. Standoffs. All right, so this guy will actually literally just go right in here like this. Now, when you're putting it in, you will notice that there's these kind of little, I guess you could say indents here on the side. Those actually always go to the sides. And there's a reason why. It's because of the way it supports the motherboard. That's the only way it can actually fit in properly. And essentially, like I said, you just kind of get the back plate in there, and it just pokes through the holes on the back of the motherboard. That's all it does. It just pokes through. Nothing to screw in back here as of yet. So we're literally just putting in the back plate like that. And now the catch is on here, if we jostle this too much, this back plate can fall out. Now, you can install this guy standing up, which is largely what we're going to try to do here, is install it standing up so it doesn't fall down. However, if you're installing a water cooler that does not have thermal paste, it is going to be a royal nightmare for you to install it while it's standing up like this. The only reason we can really get away with this is because of the fact that it's sitting down. Anyway, so to get those guys into place here, we have standoffs. Lovely, lovely standoffs. It always disturbs me, though, whenever they give you extra standoffs but not extra thumb screws, because that's weird. Anyway, so what we do with the standoffs on here, and I've kind of adjusted my lighting so you should be able to get a nice view inside there. Let's make sure that we tilt this guy ever so slightly up there. There we go. Okay, so now that we're inside the case, the back plate is now pressing against here. Now, all we need to do, make sure they're right. These standoffs here have a long side and a short side. The long side is skinny, the short side is wider. Only one will screw into these guys, and it's the long side. You try to screw in the other way, and they literally will do nothing. So, there's that. Alright, so, and this will hold our back plate in place, so that way we can set it down to do the rest. Now, generally the way you want to view it is, up to this point, up to whenever we install this cooler, things are pretty easy and chill. Once we get to the point where we actually install the cooler on here, you typically don't want to go removing the cooler unless you know what you're doing, because with this cooler, since it has its thermal paste pre-installed, whoops, I did that the wrong way. That is not the right standoff. If you notice on here, there's another standoff, and this guy has the long and the short side equal, and I noticed that really quickly and took it back out. Those are likely for the AMD side of things, in any case. So once we put this water cooler on, the thermal paste is then applied to the CPU. We can take it off and clean off the thermal paste off of the CPU, which is fine. That's perfectly doable, but you will want more thermal paste to apply. You can't reuse thermal paste. It does not work once it's cured. So just keep that in mind on here. 1 minute. Did I miss another one? Get this out here. I have one of my standoffs is also the wrong size. Give me a second. Those are the E screws. I'm already starting off on a great way, guys. Set those right there. There we go. We put in some of the wrong standoffs on here, so we're just going through and we're making sure that we put in the right ones. So it does not hurt to make a mistake as long as you catch it and then rectify it whenever you do. That's the key on there. Okay. Now, one of the things I do also like about this this guy that we're running here is the fact that the spacing on everything on the motherboard makes this super easy to work with. There's actually plenty of room to work with things that are normally kind of cramped to get to. The mixture of the case and the motherboard both make this super easy. So if you're considering a case, also look for reviews on how much space it has for you to work in it. Some cases they'll say, oh yeah, it's a nice case, but this motherfucker cramped as shit. Then you probably want to look elsewhere. Unless you're okay with cramped cases and have very small hands. Okay, so we have our 4 standoffs here tightened down pretty well. Now we want to make sure that after we have them all installed here, you want to push on the back plate so it pushes the standoffs all the way through. And you want to make sure they're tightened down enough to where it's not as easy for that back plate to go anywhere. This guy is a tricky one. There will still be some movement because the back plate will always be able to push through a little bit. But like in the case of this one down here, the back plate came out of the hole. So you want to always double check that guy before you move forward on here. A lot of times this will get made looking easy, but sometimes back plates don't cooperate as well as you want them to. And that is the ugly truth you will never hear anybody admit to. Is this the right way on here? I believe both of these sides are the same. But just to be safe, I am going to double check and screw them in the other way because there still feels like there's a lot more wiggle room than I want. Yeah, they are exactly the same. Okay. So our back place is held in place on here. It's not going to fall out. It still has a little bit of wiggle room, but that's fine. It can wiggle a little bit on there. We can get these guys out of the way. We don't need the 2011 socket type ones. Fan ones we will get to in a moment. Now, Trump hands, you must be a Reaper. Ha ha ha. Good job, guys. You're already on top of it with the jokes. Yes, if you have tiny hands, then you should be okay working on a lot of computers. You know, at least you'll have that. And of course, maybe if you have tiny hands, you can also be president. Da 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 da. All right, so with our guy here, like I pointed out earlier, this guy has the thermal paste already pre-installed, as you can tell in there by that little disc that we have here. But that's not going to be the part we install first. We're actually going to leave that guy with his little plastic casing on. First, what we want to go for is the radiator. Now, this is the part where we're going to set the case down, because installing all of this part will be easier laying flat. This is why we put on the standoffs, so that way the actual back plate will stay in place and not jiggle and run away from us as soon as we lay it down flat. So we're going to go ahead and gently set this guy down here. There we go. Make sure you guys can clearly see everything. We're going to switch it back down to the top-down camera here. High quality production, folks. High quality production. Now, before we start installing this guy on here, we will talk a bit about how terminology you might hear whenever people talk about installing radiators. Most commonly, terms you'll hear is push, pull, and combinations of those thereof, right? So what that means is the manner in which the fan is pointed and where it is located in reference to the radiator. So a pushing fan is on the inside of the case compared to the radiator. It is taking air from inside the case and pushing it out. Whereas pull is the fan is outside of the case relative to the radiator. It is pulling air past the radiator out of the case. You'll hear people say a push-pull configuration, which is a fancy way of saying that they have fans on either side of the radiator that are pushing and pulling at the same time. It increases airflow efficiency, but it's not always required. Something I will note on this case as I'm getting onto here is you guys will notice that there's a lot of space up here on the top area. This case is designed with water cooling radiators in mind. It's got several places where they can install. One of the things that this guy can do is I can install a radiator on the inside of the top here, have fans below it, and then also install fans on the top of this frame, and they'll still be in the case. Now, we're not going to be doing that here. We are going to do a push configuration. And what that means is we are going to install the radiator up against the top here and put the fans underneath it. And they will be pushing air out of the case. Now, on here, when you actually are installing this, you also want to, pay mind to how you're going to thread the water cooling tubes. So on here, I am thinking, because you can actually pretty much install the radiator any orientation you want. It will go in just fine. The fans are the ones that you want to pay careful mind to. I also do love the fact that even though YouTube chat said it was working tonight, it's still not working. So, and Kev, of course, is making some really hilarious jokes because he's jealous. That's really what it's about. So, in any case, I think we should be able to put this guy in like this. Oops, there we go. That's going to sit there like this. And the thing is don't be hesitant to kind of take a look at how everything is sitting. Look it over. Make sure the cords feel right to you. If they don't like hold yourself into it. Like, I don't like it sitting back like that. That doesn't feel quite right to me, so I'm going to try it the opposite direction like this. And you'll notice NZXT knows this, hence why they conveniently have their etched letters on both sides of the radiator, because they know that people are going to do that. Gently now. There we go. There it is. Nice and easy. And you definitely don't need to force any of this. It will go in there. You just got to be patient. So I'm thinking we'll probably go like this. Yeah, kind of liking that. Now, the reason why I'm taking time to orientate this is because one of the things we're going to be doing here is we're going to be demystifying cable management. Cable management is made to seem like this mystic skill that people have to acquire through experience and tribulation and blah, blah, blah. No, it's really not. All that it is you have to be considering it when you're building your damn PC, and so many people don't. Now, what I'm thinking on here, by the way, these thick cords are sometimes a little bit of a trick to work with, which is also another reason why you want to plan this out before you actually nail down anything. Kev, by the way, your nice AMD graphics card, I'm gonna love whenever Vega comes out and it ends up being alright. It ends up being just on par. You and Wavebend, I tell you what, you guys are like all sold on this AMD fanboy shit, and I'm like, listen, I know what has benchmarks out right now. That's what I'm going for. Is benchmarks. Third-party independent benchmarks. Okay. So we've got two potential possibilities on here. Is that I can either orientate it with the cables towards the back of the case or to the front. And we're going to set this pump right here. Because first of all, because I don't like being upstaged by a damn fan there. So one of the things I'm thinking on here, and I want to double check and see if this can do this. Another way we can actually configure this too is also to put the radiator in the front of the case up here. And if that's done and that works right, that would also be another option. But I want to double check one thing in the manual here first. By the way, guys, you're more than welcome to read the manual. Manuals are fine to read. Well, I should say manuals are fine to read whenever they actually make a damn bit of sense. You know what I'm saying? You know, yeah. So what I'm thinking on here is I'm thinking I might stick with the orientation I have it in currently. Simply because I think that's going to be the best clearance we have for these cables. So now what we do is we're going to first screw the radiator in here. That's why we set this guy off on the top here. You do want to be careful with these because there is actually liquid already in this cooler in here. So now, keep our thumb screws there. Where's my little bag of treats? Not that one, this guy. There's different ways that you actually configure this depending on how you are putting this in. But essentially, this guy comes with big, huge, long screws and short screws. The big, huge, long screws are for affixing it whenever, from the bottom, whatever is going through the radiator. The short screws are if you're actually throwing on fans on top. Now I am going to double check and make sure that I believe I will need washers, even if I put it on the bottom. I don't want to skip those because that's what allows it to flex. Ugh, this is the boring part on here. Mainly because I'm like, I don't want to break anything. I love breaking shit. Alright. Could be worse, guys. It really could be. I could have Kev's computer. And by computer, I mean Kev's console. Ha! 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 Yeah. So we do the washers. Alright, so we also have washers in here that we're going to be clearing out. Oh, good grief. I hate unsorted bags, by the way. They drive me batshit crazy. There's 2, 4, and 6. Okay. Yes, Kev, PS4, no manual required. And can you play your PS4 at 144 hertz, Kev? Can you, for a second, can you play multiplayer online on your PS4 without paying $60 per year? Oh yeah, that's right. No, you can't. Yeah, the thing is that NVIDIA just holds the high end for a... They've never actually had, like... So NVIDIA's not in the position that Intel is in. Intel has kind of been in the position where they've had a significant margin over AMD for such a long time that, to be fair and honest, Intel is overcharging for really minimal increases. They're pretty hefty overcharging for their shit. And I cannot, for a second, I actually need 2 more of those screws. I realized I can't count, guys. But that's not actually the case with... Where the hell did I put my screws at, guys? I'm losing my mind here. Kev's distracting me with all his fanboyism. It's all Kev's fault, guys. Blame Kev. Yeah, so the thing is that NVIDIA's never really had any kind of clear and objective advantage in that PC space, in their graphics card space. They've never had what Intel had. So as a result, they're not as lax in what they're doing. No, for real. Where the hell did I put those damn screws at? I'm losing my damn mind, guys. Need 2 more screws, and I can't figure out where the hell I put the bag of them at. GG, guys. Well, I guess that's the stream for the day. No, I'm just kidding. There it is. Okay, I was hiding under the standoffs here. But yeah, so that's the thing, is that NVIDIA's never really had such a clear advantage where they've really needed to slack on making their shit at least somewhat competitive. You look at, and I don't know what the prices are now. They may have dropped because the card is a bit older. But if you looked at the, the R9 Fury that came out a few years ago. Yeah, right. The Fury came out, what did the Fury come out at? Like $650? Which is coincidentally the same price as, NVIDIA's flagship card that I have right here. So that's the thing, is that, they come out with those high price cards the same there. That's on the GPU end. The CPU end, not the same. AMD does not have the same latitude that they have on the other end. Okay, so now that this is done. So when we're installing the fans will have one direction they blow. You can tell the direction that the fan air travel is going to go by a couple ways. Sometimes the fans will have an arrow on the side. These do not, because they're too pretty to. The next way you can tell is usually there's one side that looks like it's not meant to be looked at. If you look at this is very clean and etched and pretty like. And this side is just kind of like, we got a sticker and all of our necessary electronic stuff on here. This side is what direction the air will be blowing towards. The last way is you can look at the fan blades. Most fans now will have kind of a slope to them, and you just use your head, think of it like a hand, throwing air. And that's how you'll tell what direction it goes. Is the direction that it's cupping towards is where it's pushing the air. A lot of it's logic. The next thing on here is, of course, always keeping in mind the good old-fashioned cable management. We want to angle the fans so we're running the cables backwards. So this guy, the cables are going to naturally go backwards like this. So we're actually going to mount it in just like this so we can get that fan cable out the back. Well, excuse me. We're going to orientate this guy like this because it's going over here. There is a hole. You probably can't see it. You might be able to rotate the case to make it more visible here, just because this will be a good idea. There we go. There is a hole right here through the back of the case that I'm going to run the cables. I'm going to keep them tied up for now too, just to make them a little bit more manageable for me to move them wherever I want. Mainly because we have it laying flat, so I can't just pull them through as easily. And again, something I will point out for you guys. This is installing a water cooler. So if anybody's thinking like, oh man, this looks like this has a lot more steps than usual, keep in mind that this is a rather extreme example of what someone might do with a computer. Most of the time, most people building a gaming PC for gaming, actually playing games, are going to be just using the stock cooler, which literally you push down 4 pins, it snaps itself into place. It's literally done in 30 seconds. That was what was on my other computer. So again, like I said, we have another hole that's kind of more in the middle. So this guy we are going to orientate this way and push him through that hole there. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm slightly lifting up the case, being careful to stay clear of the motherboard as much as possible. I'm pulling the fan cables down through that hole. Move this guy out of the way here. And just like that. So now we have our fans up here. And these guys will be nice and out of the way once we screw it in. And that's just the easiest way to do that. Now, I'm going to turn this back towards me here, so that way I could work the screws a little bit more, if you know what I'm saying. And yeah, Kev, you can get a new Fury now for $200. That is fair. It's also, what, a 2.5-year-old card? Now, it still runs good. Not saying that it's not a good card, but what I am saying is that for a new card, when it was a new card, like for like, it was priced just the same as what NVIDIA prices their main flagship line. I'm not talking about the Titan. The Titan is actually not their main flagship line. Little tip on here, guys. Something else I am going to be doing here. As I notice the fan holes for this guy to screw this guy in, whenever I line it up, this fan here is going to get in the way. So I'm going to temporarily unscrew the back case fan so I can get to the top fan hole covers. Because this guy, I can screw in from the back of the case. We're also going to bring this guy over here so I can keep my screws all organized, or at least somewhat. Sometimes you run into that. This is the sometimes what people talk about having space in a case for. Honestly, it's not really something that I notice being a problem a whole lot. Because yes, this takes an extra 30 seconds to unscrew a fan. It's not really a major issue. Now, where you do run into problems is if your radiator is leaning over your motherboard a lot. That is a major concern. You don't want your motherboard, which sometimes may be very hot, you don't want it touching the radiator, which is a big piece of metal that also is likely to get hot, because that is where it's sending all of the heat from the CPU to. Okay, so now, where's my little... Before we do anything, we're going to set the CPU cover back on here. That's because I'm going to set this guy down here, and in case he touches the CPU, I don't want the CPU to get scratched or anything. So, you know, just so you guys see what's going on in here. Now that that's done, we can go ahead and get started with mounting the radiator in here. So this will take a little shimmy and shake to get him properly going on here. And actually what I'm going to have to do on here is I am going to have to stand this guy up. I was hoping I was going to be able to do it laying down, but I'm going to have to run the radiator hose out the back of the case, and that's going to be really tricky. NZXT made a great design, and I love it to death with this, but the downside to it is that it's almost engineered with cable management a little too well, if that even makes sense. Because essentially what it's all designed to do is it's designed for me to run these cables through the back of the computer and come up through these little rubber grommets. And unfortunately, it almost forces you to do that, so I can't even do it laying down like this. Curses you in making really well-designed cases that I can't do things the way I want to do. Erg. Okay. And we're just tightening down one screw on this guy so he's not flopping around all willy-nilly while I lift this guy up very, very carefully on here. And I'm putting a hand over everything. Fans, radiator, all of it. Just like that. And here we go. Okay. This is where your lazy Susan comes in handy. Okay, so there we go. There we go. Okay, so now that that's done here, we're just gonna give this guy a little shimmy to get him out of place on here, because essentially what I'm going to do is I'm gonna lean him back down so I can get him out of here. There we go. It almost fits up there too damn well. Go. Come on, here we go. You stay put. Okay. Also, I do find that it's oftentimes very helpful to talk to your components, because that's the way that the world works, is you talk to your computer parts, and that will make them behave in the manner that you want them to. Hello, Cause and FX. How are you doing? And Sean, you'll see what I'm going to do to the radiator here in just a moment. It's essentially because the cords here are holding it against this back part here, and I'll show you what I'm going to do with it here in just a moment. Essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take the radiator, run it back through the back first, or excuse me, the pump. Taking the pump and running the pump through the back here. Just like so. Come on. Unfortunately, we have to do it in the most awkward angle possible, because does this hard drive cage come out? Yes, it does. Okay, we're going to take out one of the hard drive cases as well, because, you know, and that's going to make my life a lot easier. And this is where the ADD thing becomes apparent whenever I have just random shit strewn everywhere. That's okay, that's just a fan. Set you off to the side here for a moment. There we go. Okay. There we go. Hard drive tray removed. Things that we probably actually are never going to use even. Hell, if I really wanted to, I could probably not even put that guy back and I would be okay. So now, I'm gonna go ahead and set this guy back here. Run him through the back very carefully, just like that. And this way, this gives us all of the breathing room we need. Go. Now we're going to end up bringing that guy back here in just a moment. This is just to get him out of the way so I can mount everything up at the top. That's the benefit of being able to remove the drive trays, right? Okay. Screwdriver's here. Okay, so now, first let me pick up my other fan so I don't lose track of it here. So now, as we were doing before, you'll notice the orientation on here, and I'm actually going to switch this back to the side camera so you can see kind of what's going on. Here we go. Okay, so now, as the radiator's up here in the top, we're going to take this guy just how we orientated it before, and we're going to run the cabling through the back just like we did before. So you take that cable, run it right up through the hole in the back, just like so. There we go. And you obviously always keep it underneath the radiator, so that way if the radiator starts slipping or anything, you're not dropping a radiator on your hand, which, needless to say, is not the most comfortable sensation in the world. So now, we line up the radiator with the top of the case, which is much easier now that this guy's moving around. There we go. Okay. Okay. A nice benefit of these guys is they also appear to have a rubber grommet to hold them in place. Okay, there we go. Let me get the washers up here. Okay. Now essentially what I'm doing on here is I'm adding these guys to kind of hold this in place for me, so that way I don't have to keep readjusting the water cooler. Anytime you can cheat, it's always a smart move. Okay, so here we go. There we go. So the radiator is now kind of held in place. I'm actually going to put a couple more on there just to be safe. Now, depending on the way that you're mounting the fans on here, the screws will go in various different ways. You either may notice yourself having to put long screws through the top, long screws through the bottom, or something in between, depending on, you know, if you are doing push, pull, or push and pull. Come on. Okay. It does also very much help if you can actually get your fingers to line up and screw in screws properly, right? Yeah, that's what they keep telling me. I don't listen to them. Small hands are things that presidents need, not myself. Okay, there we go. There we go. And now a lot of people have concerns about doing a configuration like what I'm doing because, well, they essentially have worries that the radiator is going to get dust in it and that is somehow a bad thing. So let me kind of dispel a quick rumor. Now, you're going to get dust in here and you do want to clean it out. So that's something important to note, is that yes, dust will happen. You want to clean your computer on occasion. Hell, if you have a console, make sure this guy is supported here. If you have a console, you technically want to clean that as well. But unfortunately, no one ever tells you that. Here we go. All right. So the thing is that when you get dust in a radiator, it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It just doesn't work as well because it's insulated. So having it like in this configuration means I can just quick and easy pull the top off of my computer and throw in some air dusting in there. It's actually a simpler way to have it set up for the sake of cleaning, because dust is going to happen no matter what. It's how you take care of it that matters. Okay, there we go. Now our fan's kind of in place on here, and then I'm going to get my edge fans here. The tricky one is going to be installing that back corner, because I notice already that my IO shield is going to be in the way. Now here's the thing. If you run into a situation akin to this, where you notice your IO shield is blocking one of your fan holes, you're faced with a choice of a couple of options. What you can do is you can remove your motherboard if you really want. You can do that. If you guys notice on here, both, and make sure, let me switch it to the top-down view so you guys can see on here. So up here, let me be very gentle with how I'm handling this here. Up here at the top, I have one of the pieces of my motherboard is actually blocking the fan hole cover up here, or the fan hole screw hole here. So what I can do is either I can look and see how wobbly this is, which it's pretty wobbly, but if you're able to fix it to where it feels stable enough, you can leave it be. There's not necessarily any harm in not screwing in a fan all the way, but the fact that I can see how wobbly this guy is, I know that's going to be a noisy ass fan. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go in, I'm going to pull, I'm actually going to have to unscrew the motherboard, pull it out so I can put these screws in here. This is one of those cases where things are a little annoying, but that's kind of a price that you pay with higher end components in here. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to put that fan on the back in here. So that way he's not falling all over the place. And I'm actually going to take this opportunity for the time being to also move him down so that way it's easier to get to the parts I need, so I don't actually have to unscrew him for the time being. Because this fan that I'm tinkering with right now actually has a little bit of movement that he can go from. So anyway, there we go. He is in place. So now we have the fun task of what we're going to do first. So we're going to get this guy in a safer place because we tucked him back here so we could mount the radiator. But now that the radiator is mounted, we don't need to do that anymore. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to get rid of another one of these drive cages just so I can move around a little bit easier. I love the fact that my drive cages are removable, by the way. That gives me the space I would need to work around anything. So, we got this guy here. We're going to tuck him in here, which you guys Probably can see this a little bit on here, but we're just going to tuck him in this drive bay up here. This gets him out of the way. He's protected. He's safe. Nothing's getting pinched. You just want to pay mind to it whenever I'm tipping this motherboard or the case down. First of all, you move the drive cage out of the way. But when we're tipping it down, you just put your hand on the pump, which you guys will see as I'm tipping it down here. My hand is holding the pump here under here, and now we can just kind of let him rest, and he will be out of the way, he'll be safe, and then we will actually worry about hooking him up later. Yeah, not the space you need, but the space you deserve. Yep, exactly. So some fans do have only 2 holes for mounting. That is not the case here. And that fan, you can tell, is very certainly a little bit too wobbly for anybody's liking for a fan. Fans should not be that wobbly. So unfortunately, we have to go through and unscrew the motherboard. But hey, and that means we get to double check and make sure that we didn't miss any of those skinny screws that we were fucking with yesterday on the motherboard, right? Am I right? By the way, guys, this also unintentionally acts like a review for all of the minor problems that you may run into when installing some of these parts. People keep this shit private. They like to hide these little eccentricities about building a computer. I'm trying to be transparent about them. You know, like, while building a basic computer is pain-free. Like I said, we would have been done a while ago with most of this. I'm doing something complicated. I'm trying to make it difficult, right? Before I get too far along on here, I'm actually going to not forget to... well, no, I can remove the back plate. That's fine. So keep in mind that the back plate is still mounted on this motherboard. And if the back plate was a little big and you couldn't really move the motherboard around with it on, you might want to remove that before you remove the motherboard. I don't need to do that because the back plate on here is relatively easy to work with. Okay. Let's take a look. Make sure that we got one more deep in here. I may try to get it out just bare-handed with this guy, because it is a tight fit with that extra fan in there, of course. All right. Nothing ever wants to cooperate, does it? Just have to disassemble the entire computer. All right, guys, we're going to start all over from the beginning. Let's go ahead and pull the CPU out of the socket, take out the RAM. We're apparently just going to have to start all over because this fan has to be as complicated as fuck, right? Okay. That's what it feels like sometimes. There we go. Alright, and that's the last guy here. So, I'm gonna gently lift this guy up here. We are just going to pull him out just like so. Of course, we want to be very cautious with how we do that. And where did I put my little rack? right over here. This will play nice over here, holding that up for us. So there we go, nice and stable. So now let's go ahead and get all of our fans hooked up in here first. Then we can put the motherboard back. So we'll move this guy a little bit further in here just so he's stable. All right. So the first thing on here was this guy. Let's go ahead and get him in there. Now with any of the screws on here, I typically recommend, of course, cross-threading. Oh man, let's go ahead and take my extension off. That's the first time I've had a problem where the screwdriver was too long as opposed to too short. Okay. There we go. Lining up screws blind is a lot of fun, by the way, guys. And I'm saying that, of course, in the most serious and non-sarcastic way possible. There we go. Done. And I'm going to actually put in all the fans. Even though I don't necessarily need to, I figure since I've got the motherboard out and I'm not going to have to worry about space, I might as well go ahead and knock everything out while I can, just to make it nice and easy. Now the thing is that you'll see in a lot of cases you don't necessarily have to do what we're doing here. Like I said, this is a unusual example of a water cooling setup, just because of the mixture of the motherboard, the case, and the water cooler we're using. That's literally all it is. You know, you may have a different water cooler, you may not have a water cooler, in which case none of this stuff is even necessary. Let that ruminate in your brain a little bit. All right, so now when we give that guy a tug, he's in there nice and secure. He's not going to be vibrating around, rattling like a fucking madman. That's obviously important. All right, so second fan on here, like we did before, which you unfortunately at this angle you guys can't see as well, but there is that hole up at the top. We're going to slip it through that hole and put it in there just like so. I'm going to get the first guy lined up on here. And what I typically do, by the way, for the to help me get orientated with the fans on here, what I will do is I will actually screw in, if you guys notice, the guy in the middle that's on the top, because that guy's very easy to get to. It's very easy for me to see, very easy for me to align. And then I will do the other side top, because that one is also easy for me to align when I can reach it, of course. But he's also, like, since I can align him and make it easy, that will help line up the bottom two. So essentially you do the top two screws and then the bottom two screws. Just because that makes it a little bit easier whenever you're trying to line these things up. So now in this one I need even shorter. There we go. Bottom one here. And let's get the last screw. Yeah. I know I dropped one of them on the ground. I'll retrieve it later, just because right now it would be a pain in the ass. And I don't feel like getting it. Anyway. Of course, as I said, our water cooler was not in the way. Of course, it has to prove us wrong by getting in the way right at the very end, right? Okay. Okay. Turn up this guy a bit here. Okay, and that fan feels nice and solid. Okay, so we've got our radiator, we've got our fans in here for the water cooling. Now we can go ahead and put the motherboard back in. So we're gonna tuck this guy away just like we did before, kind of keep him safe, keep him secure and out of the way. Then just like we did yesterday, only with the proper screws this time, we're gonna go ahead and gently drop this guy down in. And even though it'll feel a little bit tighter in here, we can still pretty much operate with everything just like before. We just line up that IO shield in the back, give her a little push sideways. This particular IO shield is cushioned, so you'll know you're pushing against it. It'll have like a little bit of a spring to it. But that's not necessarily all IO shields. That's just this guy in particular because he's cool. Downside is that don't have it aligned right, it'll fight you tooth and nail. It's hooked on the IO shield, which is, of course, makes this a lot more fun. No, I'm not even joking. It got stuck on the IO shield. Okay. Here we go. It's that the DVI port is the one that seems to be throwing the little fit. There we go. Now it's nice and lined up. Okay. So now that guy's in place. Let's go ahead and get started. Now I'm going to start with the guy that was giving me the most pain in my ass last time around, which was the one up in that top corner, because I like handling the difficult ones first. I don't know. Call it a thing, if you will. Okay. Of course, this guy is going to be fun to line up because we can barely even see that. This is the time whenever I wish I brought my skinny screwdriver from work. But unfortunately I was using it today, so I did not have that option. Okay. Alright, and he is tightened down there. Next screw. And again, just like before, we're kind of doing the opposite corner things just so we make sure that more even pressure is applied. You don't necessarily have to do it, but I would definitely recommend it. Okay. There we go. Fortunately enough, these guys fit properly. You guys have no idea how much that screw issue last night really bothered me, and it really shouldn't have, but you know, it is what it is. That moment whenever everything's going smoothly, you're having a good night, and then that one thing just annoys the piss out of you. Alright, here we go. Nobody likes their teeth and nails anyway. Yeah. I'm gonna have to bare hand drop this guy in because He's wanting to be a pain. All right. There we go. Go. 2 more here and the opposite side. Oh my, there we go. So of course I had to take the longest route for everything because that's more fun that way, guys. If we take the short routes, take the easy routes, then nobody ever learns anything. We're just doing the same thing over and over again. That's boring, right? Okay, so now believe that guy is nice and firm, secure. We give a gentle little tug to our motherboard just to make sure that it is secure. Okay, so radiator's installed. This is all back on here. Yeah, that motherboard is really nice. I love that the Z270 on there is really nice. So in any case, so now we have radiator installed, fans installed. Motherboard is back in place on here. So now what we're going to do is we're actually going to install the cooler itself. Now, as I said, it actually has the thermal paste already on it, which is why I've been careful to keep this plastic on here, because we don't want that to go anywhere else but on the actual CPU. So once you're actually ready to do the application on here, what we do is we line this guy up and we make sure that we have him in the right placement. And fortunately enough, this is flexible where you can do it pretty much any angle you want. But you line it up with the standoffs like so. Which, by the way, on this guy, there's actually standoffs on the inside that we're going to be using here. Just do this right there. Okay, perfect. And then we take these little thumb screws and we're going to do, again, opposing corners. So the opposing corners, like I said, applies that even pressure that I was talking about before. Ensure that we're not putting pressure on one side of the CPU. When we're holding this down, I'm not actually pressing it against the CPU. I'm actually just holding it on the standoffs, because we're going to let the thumb screws tighten it down onto the CPU. There we go. Because we want this lined up first. No, the so I'm going to turn this so you guys can see this on here, because let's see, Buns of Steel, good name by the way, Buns of Steel. No, is the radiator is on top, but in order to mount the fans properly, we had to remove the motherboard to screw the fans in, and it's a 240 millimeter fan right up here on the front here. So you can't actually see that it's up on top. It was just that we couldn't get to the underside fans because of the Strix case on there. So now we're going to apply cross pressure. We're going to tighten down the thumb screws on either corner like this. And I usually just keep doing until it feels like it's getting a little bit tighter. Then I go to the opposite corner and keep tightening, keep tightening. Now, if all goes well, that should be installed. I'm always paranoid that I have this paranoia because of the fact that the standoffs always seem really high to me, that it's actually not contacting the motherboard. And you can very gently just see how close it is to the metal on there. And you also don't want to over tighten this. You want to tighten until it just stops moving barely, right? You don't want it to be over tensioned. You should be able to pop the thumb screws very easily and just stop them. So that's done. Now we get to deal with the Hydra, as I called it. I was telling my brother how hilarious this is. This is going to be our first bit of cable management, and you'll understand why. So we have this ridiculous, obnoxious piece of cabling for this X62. So the first one is straightforward enough. This is a USB cable. This is going to plug into the side of the thing. This is pretty much for coloring the LEDs. But this guy on here is kind of your catch-all. So what he's going to do is he actually plugs in the fans. There's actually space for 4 fans on this guy here, and this is something I was talking with Zyphon about. And we were talking about how it can do 2 fans up here and 2 fans down there, and that's why there are 4 fan plugs there. However, we're obviously only going to be making use of 2 of them. Now, if you ever have a connector like this, you always want to start with the one closest to the main line and move out from there. So we're going to start with this one, then put the next guy there. That's just because the electricity then has to travel the least amount of distance. It's the most efficient way. I mean, you're talking a game of minuscule numbers there, but it's still something. So the next thing on here is that this guy is actually going into your power supply. This is a SATA power connector on here. So you should have one of those. Well, with our build, we don't even have any of them used by default because we're using an M2 hard drive down in there, that 960 Pro. But if you do have SATA hard drives hooked up, SATA power cables are unique because you only need probably one SATA cable ever running on your computer, because it will have multiple pieces or multiple power plugs off of one line. And we'll see that in a little bit here. But the first thing we're going to do is we're going to get the actual guy that plugs into the socket on the guy himself, which is down here on the bottom. And then we're going to run that out of the way and run it through the back of the computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick this guy up like so. Let's see. Okay, so you guys can see that better. Since I'm connecting my fans straight into the power source, wouldn't that make your fans run on max RPM? That is actually not what's going to happen. So this case on here, first of all, I'm going to run by 2 things on here. This case on the back, I didn't show this to you guys quite well enough last time, has a fan controller on the back here. Okay, that's actually a fan controller. Down here is an LED controller. So it's got both controllers on the back of the case. That being said, these are not plugging directly into the power supply. This little Hydra bundle of cords here, and I'll kind of run you guys through it again. This is plugging into the water cooler pump, okay? Then we have a 3-pin header for the motherboard. Then we have power connectors for the fans and a SATA connector for the power. The reason why is this guy can actually function on PWM, and I believe, I'm going to double check, but I'm pretty certain that this guy plugs into the CPU cord on here. Now, it is not a 4-pin PWM fan connector, so it does not run off of thermals. I think there's another way it operates, but I'm going to double check that before I I get to plugging that part in. The first thing we're going to do is through the back of the computer on here, we're going to run this guy through the grommet. Now, the demystification that I'm kind of running on here, on cable management, and this is kind of a lot of the secret on there that a lot of people don't think about, is always start your cables from the back. And I'll be explaining that as I'm doing it on here. Whenever you have the option, always try to get them orientated to the back of your computer first, and it's so much easier to run only what you need up to the front. Most people plug all of their stuff in from the front of the computer because that's where it's obvious to them, and then they have to worry about tucking it away. And that's where a lot of times your cable management becomes like some mystical art form, and it's really not. So in any case, I'm going to tilt this guy back. Now this guy is getting a bit heavier now since we got a bunch of stuff in it here. So you do want to be mindful of the weight. Most of the weight is at the bottom. Excuse me, I think this is upside down. Yeah. It doesn't look like that's... Guys, it's turning into a USB thing. It's Schrodinger's connector here. There we go. The part I really don't like is the fact that that's shifting so easily. There we go. That guy should be all the way up in here. Okay, then we're going to take the USB on here. Also run that guy through here. It plugs in right here. Now, both of these guys on here, I'm going to kind of pull them as tight as I can so I can try to get as much of the cord out of this main area as possible. I want to try to avoid that guy being in here. Now we're going to hold this guy aside on here because we're going to need him again here in just a moment. There we go. And I'm going to double check just because I forgot, because I'm brain dead. Shh, don't make fun of me. I believe I plugged that guy into the CPU fan header, but before you start plugging stuff in, if you can't remember, like me, because I have complete brain dead issues, 3-pin fan connector to the CPU fan connector on the motherboard. So as I thought, even though I was right, it never hurts to double check. The CPU fan connector is the top one right here. Now this guy should be keyed, so I can only fit it in here one way. Yeah, it is. Okay, good. There we go. So we plug that guy in there just like that. Then the USB guy, and that's our power there. That's our fans. We'll get to the fans in just a moment. I'm going to turn that around so you guys can see the fans getting hooked up. But next part on here is actually the USB. And so this guy, this is for the LEDs, right? This is controlling the LEDs. This is actually going to go into the USB header down here at the bottom. Again, refer to your motherboard manual to find out where USB headers are. Read the Go RAM manual, as I've been drilling in all this time here. Then we've got those two components plugged in where they need to be. Now, my thing is that I wish I could run this guy behind somewhere, and I may be sneaky and plug the fan controller back here into the CPU fan in which case then I can plug this guy in back here, and that will save us some cord on there. We'll get to that in just a moment here. That'll come into my demystification process. But for the time being, let's go ahead and flip her around. And we've got, this is all of our case plugs here. We're not going to worry about those just yet. They are coming though, don't worry. And then from here, we want to make sure that we run this under the case ones here. Now we have these 4 connectors that we had before. We're going to be plugging in two of these guys into it. And these guys actually have really nice covers on them. So I'm going to plug this guy into there. And like I said, you start at the main line, use that one first, and then use the next one over from it second. There we go. There we go. Okay, so now we've got that hooked up. Now, the thing is that these are going to end up being tied together here in a little bit. We're going to tie these off onto the side. But now what we're going to do is we're going to start getting on there. Let me make sure that I'm not getting ahead of myself. Okay, so that's done. Out of box build. IO shield, motherboard. Man, we are just cooking through this. So CPU cooler is pretty much done. So now, let's move on to step 5. Okay, so now we're going to start connecting up the motherboard here, and that's a lot of these cables up here. We're also going to get into the power supply. I like to do the power supply last, just so that way there is no, I don't have any rogue power being delivered anywhere I don't want it to be. So this is where, of course, reading the manual really comes in handy, because otherwise you're just going to have a whole bunch of shit thrown at you here. There's a lot of cables in here. These are for all the various connectors on here, and they will bundle them together for you for easy packaging, so they're tucked out of the way. However, the first thing I do is I like to untie these, because I'm going to show you guys the kind of methodology I was talking about with, in general, kind of managing your cables. So the first thing on there is you want to identify where each guy is going to be going. There we go. Pulling those guys all out here. So first guy here I can spot off the bat. It's very easy. This is our USB 3.0 header. This guy is going to go, as I suspect, along the side. So we're going to actually be running this guy through this hole here, most likely. Then we have a USB 2.0. That's a 4-pin fan connector. Oh, I think that's actually, no, that's the LED connector. We'll get to that. There's actually an LED header on this motherboard. So that's something to keep in mind. Not all motherboards will have something to that of that nature. We've got a 4-pin Molex connector, which is actually for our fan controller there. Which that will be plugged directly into the power supply. One of the nice things about this is that we can handle a lot of the cable management directly from the back here by just running it directly here to the bottom of the case, and just running it directly to this power supply. It's going to be very handy, but we'll get to that one in just a moment. So the first thing, let's go ahead and unbury the USB 3.0 header here. Untangle it from this mess. That's one of the things I don't like about the way they package them, is they tangle up the cords something fierce. So that's really what cable management is untangling a mess. And then this guy is, where's he at? Oh, I take it back, I lied. He's actually down here. So we're gonna run him through this hole. Here we go. And then, now here's the thing with a lot of these cables, since they are ribbons, you are typically okay to bend them at angles depending on what they're used for. Since, like I said, they're ribbons. So what I do is I will pull a length of it out, right? And I will actually kind of sharply angle it back at the motherboard. Plug it so I can actually have the leverage to plug it into the motherboard. And I'll show you guys the front of it here in just a moment, so you guys can see kind of what I've done. I also want to make sure you're plugging into the right spot, because that's not the right header I was looking at. By the way, guys, if you don't remember where stuff plugs in, read the manual, because I think it's actually the next one over. God damn it. Yeah. Attempt number 3 is actually this one right here, which does give me a little bit more room to work with. See, how many times are you going to plug this in one place? We're also 20 minutes out, so we should be getting done with a lot of the cable management and cleanup whenever this is on here. So I'm going to flip this around real quick so you guys can see what I'm doing. Yeah, Molecs are no fun, but that's what a lot of fan controllers run on. So if you guys noticed on here, the USB 3.0 cable is kind of looped out here pretty thick. This is actually 2 USB 3.0 headers that are plugging into one, hence the thickness of the cord. It's for the 2 USB ports up here. But now that we have it looped up here kind of thick, I'm going to grab it from the back, and I'm actually going to just kind of pull it tight just ever so slightly, as much as it can. You don't want to bend this too much, but you do want to try to keep it as much out of the way as possible. So now that that's kind of pulled tight, it's not moving anywhere. This will also keep it held into there. Then the next one we're going to look at on here, that is the USB 2.0 header, which I believe is right next door. I think I've actually used one of them. Yes, I did. So I'm actually going to, just for the sake of brevity, this is the USB 2.0 header that I have plugged into the water cooler. I'm going to move that over. The reason why is because I have another guy that's coming in right next to him, and I want that one running there. So again, like I said, starting from the back is the major trick to... No, that is not the right one. Starting from the back is your major trick to managing all of this. So this guy's actually the HD audio connector. As I looked at it closer, I looked at it the first time and thought it was the USB header. It's not. It's the one that should be over here. Yep, there we go. Okay. This is for our front HD audio, like headphones and microphone and all that good stuff. So now we're going to gently put it right here. Make sure I got that right. I am plugging it in the right way. It's keyed one way, so you can't plug this in wrong. But my problem is that since I can't see it at this angle, I'm gonna have to actually turn it towards me. Sorry guys, you're gonna be blind for a second here while I actually look and make sure that I'm plugging this in correctly. Just because the way that the light was reflecting off of this guy made him a challenge and a half to see properly. And I want to make sure I see some of these pins properly. If they don't go in right, I don't want to force them, because you can break pins. It's not easy, but it definitely can be done. So in any case, we went ahead and we shimmy that guy down on there. He's connected on here as well. And like I said, we're going to just shimmy and pull that guy tight. This guy has a looseness up at the top here. You don't want the very edge of this to be pulled too tight because they can actually start pulling those out. Now that guy's done, I actually found my USB 2.0 header finally, the one that I thought I had to begin with, and I did not. And that's the one we're going to be running right up here. Except I want it flipped around like this. Okay. There we go. Okay, so now that he's done, and you notice on here so far I'm trying to keep as much cable out of the front of that case as possible. The reason behind a lot of cable management theory that you hear is because of the fact that the less cables are up front, the better, the more airflow that you can get running through your case. This guy is a PWM fan connector that I'm going to be connecting over here. This is for my fan controller. Now, another term you'll hear thrown around, PWM fan versus chassis fan. A PWM fan actually is a 4-pin connector. That 4th pin allows data transfer of the heat of motherboard components. Most notably on there, the most notable PWM fan connector is actually for your CPU, and it allows the fans to adjust themselves based on the CPU. And I totally just missed a lot of people hopping in here, didn't I? Good grief, I was so focused on that. So first of all, hello to Anchor. You popped in here and then you ran away before I could even say anything. So you want to buy a good computer, Zahn. That is going to be tricky. That is definitely going to be tricky. Man, Kev, you were just hilarious, buddy. You talking about overtime and shit. Anyway, looks like Anchor came in and dropped a nice little host on us here. I do want to give her a quick shout out if I can remember my commands while I'm taking a break here from my cable management. See if my bot actually does what I tell it to. Yeah. So also make sure I'm spelling correctly. There we go. Anyway, so you guys can definitely check out Anchor654. She streams a lot of Dragon Age and stuff. Super cool person. Definitely check her out. Yeah, I don't know why Kev thinks that I stream at times. I don't, because he doesn't watch my streams ever. That's why he doesn't know. He comes in here, he talks a bunch of trash, and then he leaves. That's literally what he does. Anyway, so I'm going to go ahead and plug in this PWM fan connector right up there. Again, as much as possible, tugging that back out here. We have other chassis fans we're going to be hooking up here in a moment too. Do they have these guys all broken up? Oh, this is fun. All right, and then we're going to need Molex. That's from the power supply. That's an extension cable. We don't need to worry about that one. And that, I believe, is all of the chassis ones that we need to hook up now. The rest of them come from the power supply itself. So I think we're good to go, unless we want to. Well, that's for an actual fan. I think all of my fans are plugged in, so that's good stuff on there. Yeah, you're busy playing games, my ass. You like to say you're busy playing games, Kev, but let's be honest. A lot of times you're just sitting at home doing nothing, and you're like, oh, Casey's streaming? Nah, fuck that guy. In any case, so now we're going to go ahead and get started with our biggest cable, you guys might have recognized me with this one before when I was testing. This is going to be the motherboard power, the 24-pin motherboard power. So how we handle this, we start at the back, moving this guy around. Now this is going to look a lot better as we're going along here, so you guys know, once we get the power sorted out here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to again pull her hair back like we're holding her hair in front of the toilet. And then we're going to get back here. Actually, I'm probably going to do this the simpler way. And I'm actually going to remove the power supply out of the back here, just so it's easier for me to see which ones I'm plugging in here. So the basic ones that you will need are going to be the trophy score doesn't matter. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, so the main ones that you're going to want to look at on here is, first of all, you start with that motherboard power. That's going to be your thickest, that's going to be your hardest guy to maneuver around in your computer. So you start with him and you kind of work around him, because once you can get that one in place, it makes the rest of your life a lot easier. Trust me on that one. After that, then you go with the 4-pin CPU power connector, which you guys saw me hook up yesterday when I was doing my little test build. That is actually, you know, a basic one that you're going to want to use for any computer. After that, the GPU power connectors vary based upon your GPU. Since I have a higher power GPU, which we're going to be installing in just a moment here, that guy is going to be take a lot more power off of here. So in any case, we're going to go ahead and hook this part in. And I'm also doing this guy first because this guy will be, after we do this part, we're actually going to be installing the GPU. But I wanted to do this one first because of the fact that it's easier to work around the GPU than it is that guy. So in any case, let's go ahead and get this guy tightened back on here. I do love the easiness of thumb screws on the power supply block on here to easily remove it if I need to. Not as much easy once this guy gets all set up and running, but you know, whatever. It's a good start, right? Okay, so he's all tightened back down here. So now we have our motherboard power, this big, huge, thick-ass fucking cord, right? So what we're going to actually do on here is run it through this one here. And you're going to see where it's coming out in the front on there. Now, once we get these cables here sorted up on the back, and they're never going to be perfectly pretty, but essentially we want to try to separate some of these cables from the big guy first, because otherwise it's going to make your life hell later on. Yeah, Zon Bosley, if you're looking into buying a new computer, that's one of the reasons I am doing what I am doing right now. I'm demystifying this shit for you. Now, it looks like you've got this crazy-ass Hydra back here, but the moment that we just real quickly tie off this bundle of cables right here, right? This little bundle that we have, let me make sure I get all of them. All of a sudden, this will start to look a little bit more sensible, because we had this big bundle that was kind of flying everywhere. And then now, just with a simple twisty tie, and that's what I recommend using, twisty ties. They're cheap, they're expensive. If you can get Velcro ties, that's cool, that's fine. But now, with that just one twisty tie on there, we now have a bunch of these cables tied back here. Now, it's going to be a little bit easier to get our big guy here running through. Now, if you are putting in your hard drives, you do want to pay mind to where the hard drives are. Let me get this guy out of here. We don't need that one. This is a twisty tie that was holding in the little box o' screws. In any case, so now, let's see, we've got about 8 minutes on here. We'll see if we can get this part put in here. And so when you're actually running these through here, right? You want to pay in mind where the graphics card's going to go. I'm actually going to be taking out these bottom hard drive cages, and the reason why is because I'm going to have a big big graphics card in here, which will fit without me removing these. However, I want some extra airflow. Now, on this case, you will notice something that is missing up here. There is no place to put a 5 1/4 inch optical drive, a CD DVD combo drive, right? That's because nowadays those are becoming less popular. You're noticing very few computers using them. People have moved on to the digital age. They have Netflix, they have Hulu, they have YouTube, they have Twitch. Hi guys, I love you all. In any case, because of that, you are noticing less computers having optical drives. And because of that, this case doesn't even give you the option for it. Not everybody will be down for that. Some people want a disk drive on their computer, and that's fine. But in this particular case, that gives us an additional flexibility to put any additional hard drives where an optical drive normally would go, which is namely going to be way up high up here. The benefit of that is that it takes it out of the way. Counting overtime? No, not counting overtime. We're not going to be doing this until fucking forever o'clock like we did last night. In any case, though, now what we can do on here is this guy, still out of the way of our main build, we can run this guy around back here and keep him even more out of the way. Tuck him right in there. Just set him in that rubber grommet. And then we're going to flip it back to the front side here. Xiphon, in hindsight, you really should have just sent me your Lazy Susan. Because my Lazy Susan solution did not work. So in any case, now that we're back on the front side here, we're going to plug in this guy here. Now, the 24 pin is keyed, which what that means is that these guys have little square and not so square shapes to them, so you can only plug them in one way. Now, the fun part of this, and I'm gonna have a little bendy work with this guy. The fun part of this is that oftentimes this is not taken into consideration whenever the cord is wrapped up. It's wrapped up in a hurry so they can get it the hell out of the door as quick as possible. As a result, you'll notice things like what's going on here, where it's bent the opposite way than it needs to be. And I just know this because I plugged in enough of these to where I know immediately where it needs to go. Anyway, so now that we have that on here, we're essentially using this rubber grommet to hold it in place. We technically don't need this. We could just run it straight this direction and that would hide it. But I like this because this keeps it nice and tidy in there. Now, so we've got our big guy plugged in on here. We're going to start tomorrow. I suppose I can get a couple more of these guys plugged in here. Like the CPU power, that'll be an easy enough one to plug in here. So, and then we're going to finish up the power cords tomorrow, and then we're going to install the granddaddy, the big beast, the graphics card at the end, the one that Kev is secretly jealous as hell of. Yeah. So that is 8 minutes counting overtime or more space for cooling. Yes, this extra space removing these drive bays does mean that you have more open airflow. It's easier for air to move through your case, which means that in general you're going to have a much easier time doing cooling your computer. Not as big of a deal for us here because of the fact that we're water cooling the CPU, but it still can't hurt. It's never going to hurt. So that's an important part on there. Now, we're going to get the CPU guy hooked up in here. Now, this is where I bust out the really, really comical toys, by the way, guys. Because I'm dealing with a really awkward angle that I can't see in. I'm gonna go spelunking, guys. This is the fun part of the stream, right? I'm gonna go spelunking in here, finding this CPU power plug. It's hidden, guys. It's hidden underneath. It's like a treasure trove under here. Okay, so here we go. Pro tip, always look where you're plugging shit in. Okay. This power supply will, fortunately enough, not let you plug in anything if it's going the wrong direction, if you're trying to put it in the wrong slot, which is good because then you don't end up accidentally plugging in something into a slot where it doesn't belong. Downside on that is, of course, is making sure you can actually plug in stuff here properly is sometimes a little bit of a pain whenever you can't see the power supply. Now, alternatively, we can, and we probably will, try to end up pulling out the power supply a bit. I just wanted a chance to show off my cool little headlight here. You know. Come on. There we go. Well, that's fun. I'm probably gonna have to do that later because it is getting that time. Anyway, we'll get more of these hooked up tomorrow, and you guys will see kind of the cable management as it's coming together. Like I said, the kind of summary for today, the big tip on there is when you're doing cable management, try to start from the back and kind of keep everything layered on top of itself from the start. That's the real demystifying of cable management, is starting from the back. So we'll go ahead and switch off of the big camera over here. So just to kind of give you guys some closing statements on kind of some of the things, 3 my use them. You know, honestly, Zyphon, that is a pretty good way of doing things, is using a flashlight mounted on something. That can work as well. I have one mounted on my head because essentially, you know, where it goes, like where my head goes is where it goes. So, or is where the light goes. Anyway, we're going to get signed off here for the night, guys. I will be back again. Like I said, tomorrow night, we're going to be finishing up the last of the power plugs on here, going to be putting them in, and then we are going to be hooking up the GPU. If we can get that done quick enough, we will actually start seeing if we can do some test boots and start loading up the OS. That's going to be a big part of it. And thanks very much for everybody that tuned in. Thank you very much for Anchor for throwing me the host halfway through on there. That's much appreciated. And we'll be back tomorrow night with hopefully the last stage of the major build. Like I said, if we get done building it tomorrow and we have extra time, I'll do some of the software installs on there. That's not necessarily as complicated to a lot of people on there. Yes, I was screwed last night. But yeah, so if we barely get done in time, we don't have enough time to do some software installs or anything like that, I'm going to do that off stream. That's just because that's not necessarily something that's really something needed in a PC build. Installing Windows is a pretty straightforward process. Most of it's just doing test boots and all that. Anyway, we're going to get signed off here for the night, guys. And we'll get back tomorrow night, hopefully with everything working. Tonight it said that YouTube chat was working, but apparently it still wasn't. Whatever. Any case, you guys have a good night. We'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.